Humanity in general seems to have an interesting drive that's sort of different from the rest of nature, that is to create something that carries like the vessel of consciousness. I've been asking people like for a couple of years now, also on Twitter, doing polls. What do you think should survive? Is it humans as a species? Is it human civilization and culture? Is it DNA, so life as we know it?
Yeah.
Or is it consciousness? And people always answer 70% plus consciousness. Which is something we do not really fully understand what it is, right?
Yeah, we really don't.
And yet, people would answer that it is consciousness that we want to carry forward, right? And so I think, where humans are headed and why are we, creating AI, which poses so much risk. And, we treat it as a sort of like, I like to think of it as like, we messed up, so now we're creating our own mom to come and fix it for us, like we can't
figure out how to slow down this machine, Mom.
We can't control it anymore, like please fix it for us. So you're gonna be smarter and better than us, like we're kind of trying to create our own God that we've always been yearning for.
Yeah.
And I think we will, in a way.
Yo, what's good, ReFi Nation? John Ellison here from ReFi DAO, dropping an episode with my good friend Matt Cyrankiewicz, founder of the Liminal Future Group, which is an umbrella of organizations pioneering a regenerative future. We have the chance to hear Matt's take on the broadest cycles of our time, technology evolving at an exponential rate thanks to the help of AI and other tools, and on the other hand, climate and biodiversity collapse and the systemic injustice that ensues. We touch on Matt's story as he became an entrepreneur at the early age of 20, sold a company in Silicon Valley, and went on a journey to find himself and to really look deep into the seed of consciousness, trying to reconcile what this has in store for us as individuals and as a species here on this planet. We learn about his 30-day deep dive using an AI copilot to recreate his entire service agency and how he's now partnered up with an incredibly potent brand strategist out of Google to help organizations all over the world, nonprofit and climate tech included, to redesign their work streams and their business models using AI as an integral part of the system. At the end, we close with a recognition of the emergence of all of these different communities, ReFi DAO, Future Horizon, Regions Unite, Green Pill Network included, that are trying to push forward a new model for society, starting with small gatherings, meeting regularly, and bringing in technology, capital, and consciousness into the equation. I hope this conversation leaves you with the same sense of hope and optimism that it left me. I am incredibly excited to build together with Matt to go visit this land in Estrella, this regeneration hub that they're pioneering, and to see the moments that we make today have lasting impact for generations to come. Thanks for tuning in. Look forward to hearing what you think of the show. Yo, Matt, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me, John.
How's it feel to be back in Lisbon?
Feels great. I mean, it's been a short few hours, really.
Okay, where are you coming in from,
came
bro?
back last night.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Nice.
And it's like a new fashion. All flights need to be late, so I arrived like 3 hours late.
TAP loves being late, man. It's the only way that they can go.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while now, and I know you've been up to some really interesting work across the board. Before we jump in, I'd love to invite us to just a couple minutes of silence, play a little music, and invite anybody listening to pause and take a seat wherever you are about your day, and we'll jump into things. Becoming aware of the slow, quiet breath. Coming in through your nose and out through your mouth. Feeling the weight of gravity pulling you down. The sense of being held by this massive Mother Earth. And as your heart beats, sensing this rhythmic gift of life that is present with us today. Knowing that we are not alone in this pursuit of a better world for our children and for generations to come. knowing that despite all of these complex crises we face, that all of the tools are here. And all of the capital is ready to be deployed. Giving yourself just a moment to visualize in your mind's eye your unique contribution to this symphony of regeneration. Take a few deep breaths in through the nose. Fully in. And let it go. Last slow, deep breath in through the heart. Long, slow exhale. There we go. Hey,
Boom.
boom,
What a
boom.
way to start a podcast.
Right. I know it's not the usual thing, but I love it. We
This
do
is
it.
great.
We do it in our team meetings, and yeah, every once in a while, listeners on the pod just be like, "Man, I love those moments of pause."
Yeah, we've been doing it in our all hands for my team
Yeah?
for 3 or 4 years now. Every all hands
Oh, dude.
always starts with meditation. Yeah.
At Hukuiku.
Ahokuiku, yeah.
Ah.
FutureWorks now, yeah.
I love it. FutureWorks now. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, dude. There's so much to dive into. I don't know how you juggle everything that you do, but it'll be a great chance to peel back the veil of the work that you've been doing. I think it'd be nice. In hearing your voice reminded me at Future Horizon in Sintra, you have this beautiful slide communicating these kind of colliding supercycles of rapid technological innovation on the one hand and climate and biodiversity collapse on the other.
Yeah.
Where does this idea come from, and what does it mean for you in the work that you're doing?
I read about that idea. I can't remember his name right now, but but he's a Pulitzer-winning journalist, and I've read an article a while ago about how we've got those two super cycles right now, and everything really when you observe in our civilization right now comes out of those, and that's technology and climate, and those are increasingly it's maybe become noticeable by an average person somewhat recently. At least in technology in modern sense. I mean, humanity has always been developing technology and sort of our obsession for some reason. But those two have become so powerful that they shape the entire planet right now.
And it's interesting. It seems like you got into the AI scene before the hype bubble most recently, and have obviously been involved in a number of AI projects at Hukuiku. What is the story that you see there? Over the last 10 years, it seems like we've gone on a major evolution. Where are we now? Where's this going?
Yeah, well, we've been working on a whole bunch of AI projects for years now, and we've been trying to work with AI, not just on those projects.
Yeah.
For at least three years, I would say. First time we tried to make websites using GPT was like 2021 September, I think. I think we're reaching that state that bigger players would call maturity, AI maturity, essentially, where you can actually use those technologies. You can use them in business, you can use them personally, and they actually are starting to perform and work. The fun thing about that space is that the more those things work, the more they help create their own advancements. So there's this concept of double exponential, where we've had this exponential growth of technology, and which has really accelerated around 150 years ago, right? If you look at the history of humanity, all metrics related to humanity, also including life expectancy and a lot of positive metrics, but unfortunately also pollution that then created climate change and so on. We've got this hockey stick. And now we've got this additional layer where the more the AI develops, the more it actually helps develop AI and technology. And so we're seeing the double exponential. We're somewhere at the doorstep of singularity, I guess. And And so it's an interesting future ahead of us.
And when you say singularity, what do you mean by that? I feel like that term is used in many different contexts.
It is used in many. There are many meanings to it, but I use it in the sense that I mean singularity in the sense where the advancement of technology becomes so fast that you cannot really predict the future.
Yeah, and also to me, it references this kind of transhumanist movement where there's so many rich people in the Bay Area who've glimpsed all the material success that this world can possibly provide. And they seem to be pivoting on this idea of, artificial intelligence and embedded devices creating a kind of new type of human.
Yeah.
And I feel like this story is a natural continuation, evolution of, the industrial curve that you described, where, we're not only mechanizing every process of the way that we produce our food and the way that we manage resources, but we're beginning to kind of internalize that mechanization in ourselves and to see ourselves as, computers and wanting to expound our abilities and augment our intelligence with this source of the internet that is vast and seemingly infinite. And then now AI, which basically reduces the buffer and makes a seamless access to this. What's your take on this story in particular? I know you've done some work in the Bay. I know you're in this kind of scene. What's your take on this transhumanist movement?
I think not to go too deep, but in a deeper sense, I just came back from a very interesting gathering, and among others, there was Jonathan Schooler, a professor of spirituality at UC Santa Barbara, and many other friends. We've been discussing similar subjects, and also driven by some experiences that I've had with Dr. Sam and so on. Humanity in general seems to have an interesting drive that's sort of different from the rest of nature, that is to create something that carries the vessel of consciousness. I've been asking people for a couple of years now, also on Twitter, doing polls, what do you think should survive? Is it humans as a species? Is it human civilization and culture? Is it DNA, so life as we know it?
Yeah.
Or is it consciousness? And people always answer 70% plus consciousness, which is something we do not really fully understand what it is, right?
Yeah, we really don't.
And yet, people would answer that it is consciousness that we want to carry forward, right? And so I think when you look at, where humans are headed and why are we, creating AI, which poses so much risk, and, we treat it as a sort of I like to think of it as we messed up, so now we're creating our own mom to come and fix it for us. We can't
figure out how to slow down this machine, mom.
We can't control it anymore. Please fix it for us. So you're gonna be smarter and better than us. We're kind of trying to create our own God that we've always been yearning for.
Yeah.
And I think we will, in a way. There is a debate whether that could carry on consciousness, and perhaps it is. And if you think about what consciousness is, then many would say, it's you're kind of in this world as a sort of hologram in this space, performing some sort of action, computation, perhaps for some being, some source, something that's behind it, right?
Right.
And many call it God. There are many stories around it, but that's what kind of the common denominator would be.
Totally.
And if you were to look at it from a panpsychist perspective, where there is this spirit that kind of passes through different levels and goes into the smallest, and perhaps goes down to cells, and
self-similar, fractal, repeating nature.
But then it goes up. Then you could argue that an AI and or augmented humans, going with the transhumanist movement, could allow for a better form of computation and cognition for the system, if that was a system. So maybe it's beneficial for it. So perhaps we are, fulfilling this purpose.
Yeah,
that's my take, right? And so I'm not from our perspective, I'm not really against or for. Sure. I think from a long-term perspective and where we're headed, it's inevitable at this point. It seems this way, and it's just perhaps the role of the species of humans is to kind of carry on the light of consciousness as we know it, and develop it further for further levels of cognition or computation or what is it, right?
And this insatiable appetite for data along the way. You know? And I think it's an interesting narrative. It reminds me a little bit of Noah Yuval Harari, who obviously rocked the world with *Sapiens* when he first released, and *Homo Deus*, touches very much on this. But I think, also having done some work in the Bay, there's this fascinating trend where, there seems to be tolerance for all things except for people who want to believe in things that are outside of what can be empirically observed, measured, and reasoned with. And I think this wave of artificial intelligence alongside the increasing extraction of resources from Mother Nature really does force us to look very intimately in the eye and say, what does it mean to be human? If these machines are so much more capable and effective at performing the tasks that I otherwise would do for my livelihood, what am I to do? And I think these moments and these inquiries, as we're watching, this technology ramp up and take very large portions of the work and labor force over the next 5 to 7 years, really give people, I think, a much even bigger disruptive inquiry than the pandemic. I don't think we've really seen the societal transition that will be forced because of this tool. And at the same time, we're looking at rising temperatures, collapsing ecosystems, and for me, a seeming recognition among society that we do need nature. Just regardless of what you think of the exact science of climate change and the cyclical nature of it, like humans are better off in nature. We feel at home there. And, yet all of our cities are completely removing this life force from our context. And there are really only a few remaining societies that have actually figured out how to live symbiotically with nature. And they tend to be indigenous. And I think there's this interesting, call to action as we build these really powerful tools to look very deep into the heart of some of these, ancient indigenous wisdoms. And with that, I know you had some pretty pivotal moments in your life journey experience. You've been an entrepreneur for a long time. If I recall, you started your first company at 18 or 19 years old?
20.
Yeah, 20. Yeah, similar. So I'd love to hear a super high level 10,000-foot view of your journey. And what were those pivotal moments where you kind of witnessed consciousness in a new light? You witnessed this, transition of humanity in this new perspective. And take us all the way to the moment of where we are today, and we can pull out threads.
I didn't expect to go down the consciousness part, but I actually like it because that was, high level story actually has a bunch of that. So that goes perhaps quite personal. I'm from Poland, right? Born and raised. Always been there. My parents, when I was a teenager, they moved into a forest. I lived there. We got deers walking in the garden and so on. No neighbors, and it's both beautiful and kind of tricky when you're a teenager. So when I was 18, I went to Ireland to study multimedia. Ended up dropping out after a year. Went into marketing. Had a brief career I was a designer. I went from junior to senior in a few months.
And true that fashion.
It was at the time it was great. I was making 5 times the money my parents were making together when I was 19,
Nuts.
But then I felt like marketing wasn't for me, and so I went into art and saved up some money, started doing interactive art. I started building interactive installations that would have kind of pre-Kinect sort of motion detectors. And then I became poor again. so I started...
The art path equals poor.
So I went back to university in the UK. I negotiated that I could finish an entire degree in 1 year.
Nice.
If I can prove to them that I can. And they allowed me to do it, which was cool. And during that year, I started my first startup, which was actually a platform for artists.
Oh, nice.
And then that evolved into my first proper startup, which was Dropper. And I ended up in London for a while, and then moved it to Silicon Valley. And I was there for a bit, ended up leaving, exiting the startup eventually, and traveling the world. And
nice, bro.
Initially, I left. I was really unhappy in Silicon Valley, and I had a great life there.
You had it all.
We had, in the material way. I was it was a great.
That was sorted, bro.
But I was really unhappy for some reason. And then I just went traveling, and I went traveling for 3 months. To India and Sri Lanka and so on, and I came back and I was like, I just want to keep traveling. So I packed up my apartment into black bags, got a van from a loaner van, packed it all up, took it to charity, gave away all my stuff,
Wow.
sold a car, my motorbike, and like gave away speakers and stuff to friends. And I just packed into a suitcase, went traveling, and after a few, I think 5 months, I sent back the suitcase home, and I just had a backpack, and I traveled for 2 more years.
Really light.
And in that process, I started building Hukuiku as the digital professional services company that's fully remote, right? That was like 2015, and it was like completely fully remote since the beginning. It was a bit of an experiment, like just, can you do it? Like, can you deliver services without seeing anyone? And we've been just building like apps for Silicon Valley companies, primarily. And as I was traveling, like, one thing that I started getting was like happiness and glimpses of it and deeper understanding. And in that deeper understanding, I realized that why I wasn't happy all this time was imbalance. And the imbalance was actually lack of spirituality, to go back where you went.
Oh, wow.
And that's, I started discovering spirituality, started discovering Buddhism, then diving deeper, doing plant medicine, you know. And I found this kind of like light, you can call it,
Sure.
where I was suddenly just happy, you know, no matter what happened, you know, everything started becoming, you know, events in life, but I was just happy. And which was always a very, very wild concept to me. Like, I think I've been unhappy basically since I was a teenager.
Same.
And the interesting thing is that when I was a teenager, I think when I was like 14, I read the Bible, Quran, Torah, and I kept going to priests and asking them questions.
Dude, we have such a similar
after
story.
that,
It's crazy.
I was like, I think this is all bullshit. And so there's clearly no God and no magic behind it, and that's it. Like, this is just like atom world, and we're just pieces of meat. And then, you know, and it kind of overlaps, you know, with the times when I was like depressive, you know, and like, and so, you know, I just found my path to spirituality, like a new form. You know, I come from a very Catholic family in Poland, you know, very traditional. And I found like my form of understanding of what they meant by God being in everything and this connection, and, you know, and that enabled a lot of further thinking.
Yeah, I love this. And also the realization that actually, you know, our brain lights up when we access this sense of, you know, spirit, or that which cannot be observed physically and understood. And it really is a key part to, you know, a holistic functioning brain, and it informs our decision-making capacities and enables us to access parts of our intuition that we otherwise couldn't. And so I love seeing, you know, neuroscience begin to really uncover the wisdom of this, yet also knowing, you know, the risks and the dangers and the complete folly and systemic injustice that has emerged from these systems as people, you know, leverage this as a vehicle for power and influence and control. And so, I, you know, similarly in my adolescence also went down those deep rabbit holes a bit earlier and was just like, I don't want any of this.
Yeah.
And yet we find ourselves, you know, at material success with all of our needs met, you know, wondering, is this really it? You know, and like the startup story of going to the Bay Area and selling your company, like that's the pinnacle moment in your startup journey. And yet it's not, you know, and I think this recognition of finding satisfaction in those small moments in everyday life, and those intimate connections with a neighbor or with a stranger or with nature or just yourself, providing such abundant experience and love and connectedness really gives me a lot of hope for this transition that humanity's undergoing, because so much of our society is just geared towards resource accumulation.
Yeah.
When actually it doesn't work. It doesn't fill the void. And if we can build cultures and communities and societies with this deeper recognition of what we actually need to survive. We need deep, intimate human relationships. We need clean water, clean air, healthy soil, vibrant ecosystems. You know, it's shelter. It's not that complicated, right?
It is not.
We've made it so incredibly complicated chasing a story that just doesn't serve us anymore.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciate you kind of opening the bones of this experience that you had, and yet also driving forward as a founder and as a creator, pushing to make a contribution and make the world a better place. So where did these two kind of insights arise? You had Hukuiku on the side, this kind of full service agency that you're building. You're having these experiences traveling around the world, and it seems like you've made a real hard effort to integrate these two things into, you know, a holistic system.
as I traveled, firstly, Hokuiku was built on like a 4-hour work week framework.
Yes,
and
bro.
by
Yes,
influence of the early wave of digital nomadism. So I was like, I had a hard limit, like maximum 20 hours of work a week.
So sick.
And you gotta build this new company, but otherwise you're like exploring the world, right? So I went through
cool.
like 60 plus countries during that time, and I had an amazing time. But as I traveled, I noticed there are a lot of issues, right? And I've always been aware of those, and my parents are very kind of environmentally inclined and so on. I've been always sort of inclined in that direction, but it's never been like my pursuit or something that I've worked on actively.
Yeah, yeah.
But then I traveled, and you end up in Southeast Asia, and there's just so much pollution or South America, and so much injustice and so many issues to help with, right? Like, and I just felt bad just doing, work, making apps for rich people, making rich people richer,
Yeah.
and which is something that we've been doing a lot. And what I did is that was like 3 years in to the journey, reoriented Hokuiku to focus on what we put under the agenda of building a better future, and that was. We started choosing our project much better.
Nice.
And we created a non-profit arm. So we always had like a bunch of work going on the side, primarily in like environmental, social justice, and education. Various projects we did like at cost or pro bono.
Nice.
That was like an ongoing thread. And then we started like a little venture studio for projects that could drive impact. And started an event series called the Tribal Gathering, actually.
Okay, that's how it started.
So like when I finished traveling, I decided like I don't want to get lost in life. I want to actually be somewhere.
Having a home is nice.
So like 3 years, I was like, okay, like maybe it's time. And so I moved to what I thought would be the place where I can live somewhere but still feel like I'm traveling, which was New York.
Yeah.
And there we started the event and so on. And I started too many things at once, perhaps. So I also started a Burning Man camp.
Nice.
Called F.
You and me both, bro. We love spinning lots of plates.
I know you do. You're probably like, you do even more so.
I don't know. I hope not.
The camp was called F for Friends, Family, Future. And it was like just to unite various people I met in my journey and bring them together under the agenda of like envisioning what a good future could be. Because at the time, the only visions of the future we knew was dystopia, right? Like no one really talked about solar punk or anything like that. And so we started gathering people to think, like, what would it be? And it was kind of like, the vibe was kind of like Tulum meets Star Wars. The first camp was a disaster, but people liked it. And then we organized the second one, and it was epic. And we've had like great time. And that kind of gave birth to this second part of what's ongoing, which is the community.
Yeah.
So that was born through the camp. But then I moved from New York to the Caribbean, to Dominican Republic. And we organized our first, as our friends, just threw an idea, like, how about you call it Future Horizon? And we're like, okay, yeah, that sounds good. Let's
Kudos to the friend. Nice name.
It was meant to be just it was meant to be just just kind of like a retreat for Hokuiku team, plus some friends, kind of like a small gathering, But it so happened that it was, I think the event was 10th to 16th of March 2020.
Wow.
And I think the market collapsed on like 13th. and so it's basically people were arriving, and it was like they heard about some people getting sick in Italy and in Asia. And 5 days later, they're like in lockdown. We're leaving this event, everyone's in lockdown. Some people stayed for a month with us in the ER because they didn't want to go home.
Yeah, no way. I'd rather be on an island with you guys.
It was crazy. Like basically lockdowns happened during this event. So almost no one who came to that event went to another one for over a year. And so they had a lot of time, and they just got inspired. So amazing things happened. Like there were like incredible impact organizations born, and that raised a lot of money and made a lot of difference just after. And we've been like since struggling to repeat that because it was just such a magic period that it just so happened that we're like at the horizon. People were laughing that it's just like literally like the horizon of the unknown. So it was quite incredible. So after that, we decided to start doing it more. And then so we started organizing more Future Horizons, and then that led to FutureQuest.
Yes, man. That's where we met. I remember seeing the deck. I was like, damn, these people are good. This stuff looks so bomb. And where do they come from? Like, oh, they've got a whole design development agency behind them. Like, I can feel less bad now. Yeah, amazing. So let's take a snapshot of Future Horizon. How many events have you guys done? Like some of the key locations, some of the, people that have attended. Just give a quick canvas of this venture within the broader group.
Yeah, it operates as a non-profit. It was just kind of like a product of passion, and I think the main goal of this was to search for like what does the future path look like, and what does it mean? What should we strive for to even achieve?
Yeah,
and yeah, we've had like I think in total 12 events or something like that, and but 4 main ones. And main ones are the multi-day kind of 120 people.
Yeah.
Events, and the last one was 155, I think. Yeah, they happen like in Dominican Republic, in Brazil, in here in Portugal.
Yeah, man.
You were there.
Sintra. What a beautiful venue.
And we've done a lot of side events as experiments as well. So we've done Climate Week and COP and so on. Yeah.
And it really feels like you guys are trying to build a bridge between, worlds that are otherwise distant and apart.
Yeah.
And I think also with the work that you guys have done at FutureQuest, it seems as though there's this need to bring things together that otherwise wouldn't be. And, the events obviously in person and FutureQuest online. I'd love to talk a little bit about the journey at FutureQuest and then land us at this 30-day journey that you did at, I think, quite the beginning of the year, which I felt was a really strong leap. You have had a lot going on, but you had this conviction that you needed to set things aside and test out a hypothesis. So before we jump into that, high level on FutureQuest, some of the work you guys have done there, and I guess part of the theory of change of these, 2 different systems and what you're building as a larger movement.
I think FutureQuest was driven by our realization that it would be very hard to repeat 2020 unless we build something structured and a mechanism that can fund vetted founders and organizations that are promising to drive a bigger amount of change longer term. And so we've built this on Web3 rails. And it was a funny time because like the thoughts really arose around Future Horizon Rio, and after we've done some exploration into DAOs and so on, and and we sort of just like threw it. If you saw the deck that we sent out initially, it was literally just text on white with like some pasted images. And,
it got better.
And the title of the deck, I think, was An Ugly Deck for a Beautiful Future. And I put it together on the flight.
MVP, bro, MVP.
And I sent it out, and it had like 1.7 million in commitments within like 2 weeks. And we're like, wow, okay, we've got something.
There's an appetite.
Yeah, so let's go.
You know the right people.
And then suddenly Luna happens, and everything starts, and we're like, whoa, catching this.
Bro.
And so we decided to like do it, despite going clearly heading into Web3 bear market, and so it's been quite a ride. But we managed to build a bit of a Web3 community, and we've managed to work with partners and also use our own treasury to fund a bunch of organizations and supported the founders in every way we can, like like connecting with others, with each other, running those bounties. It's been quite a journey. That's been the dream, basically, to build out a vehicle that allows us to fund founders where we can see like the spark, where we can see like there is something, and even if we make a small contribution there, then that's gonna lead to a bigger effect in the future. And the idea was to fund a nonprofit and eventually build a for-profit investment vehicle around it. And and so we did that with a lot of effort, because it's been not easy going into like, especially after FTX, when we're actually starting because we started the project in July 2022, announced it in August, and it was just going straight into like this off the cliff. But it's been we did manage to support 17 organizations, essentially between 25 to 50K each, and we've built this kind of core community. And I think the biggest result for that is we've developed a lot of understanding of what works and what doesn't, and what worked in that time. That's why we've got now this like FutureQuest project, which is like a deep evolution of it, actually, like driven by months of conversations and data and feedback and from yourself as well.
I love the tango. And we're super grateful to be a grant recipient that winter with the Gitcoin round being pushed back. Like, that was an amazing play, bro. You stepped up. You're like, hey, there's a huge lack of funding here. We need to come together, guys. Like, all right, let's go. Let's do it. Let's see what we can do, bro. Let's keep people afloat.
Yeah, we kept afloat wherever we could at the time.
Yeah,
we had a lot of applications, and we were able to support 17. Unfortunately, not more because the money vanished.
I know, man. Like, shaky legs.
It was just impossible to fundraise anymore in this space.
Totally.
But we did a bunch, and now we're working on like the next phases of it, basically.
And what was the moment where you just said, hang on a second, AI is peaking as a wave. I need to set aside 30 days just to do this experiment. What prompted that?
I wish I could just do this during those 30 days.
Oh, yeah? Oh, God, you were juggling everything else.
I was. But we were in Brazil, actually. I was getting engaged. And we're on that land. We've got this land project in Brazil. So, and suddenly I see this wave, like mid-March this year. And I see this wave of announcements, right? Come forward. And I, try out GPT-4, and I'm like, wow, this is so different to what I knew from the results are so different. I'm not getting so much hallucination. I'm getting far better answers. I'm getting some like solid structure in this. It's like something to work with. And then someone, does this hustle GPT thing. And which was like someone just announced this, that they're gonna make GPT-4 their boss, give them the mission to make as much money as possible in 30 days, and this is their challenge, right?
Oh, nice.
And a lot of people followed, and it became this like movement and community. And kind of observing that, but at the time we were traveling, came back home, and I was like, it's actually a good time, like I should try and see what is it possible to do something like that. And also I really wanted to try solopreneurship because it became such a big thing. And I technically was a solopreneur for the first 5 years of Hukuiku, but then I added a partner. Plus, I didn't really have that mindset in a way, or like the modern solopreneur mindset with all the tools. I wanted to see like what is actually available because we are seeing a huge wave of tools, no-code tools, various processes, approaches that enable people to start companies. Like our prediction is that like, there will be a bunch of unicorns founded by a 14-year-old solopreneur, in the next few years, right? Yeah. Because it's so available,
so accessible.
But I didn't have the time to do it, so I was like, okay, how about I dive myself, lab rabbit as usual, and
lab rabbit, I love it,
and test it. And so I embarked on, I just changed Hustle GPT to Partner GPT. I thought that like, making it my boss is probably a little bit, not yet, maybe next year. But making it my partner would be interesting. And so I made him my partner, and I actually followed the plan that the partner created. I gave it the voice of Hunter S. Thompson to make it quite fun. And I started tweeting everything, every day as I went.
So it gave you the plan?
Yeah, it actually gave me the plan and the name for cool. FutureWorks. Yeah.
For FutureWorks, really cool. So you're like, hey, I've got this agency, Hukuiku. I want to basically, as a solopreneur, rebuild everything we do with you as my copilot. Right? Was that the prompt?
Pretty much. I can't remember. It's somewhere there on
the verse
on Twitter. But
nice.
Yeah, it was kind of like that. You're my partner. Together, we're gonna build a professional services company that does this and that. And
amazing.
We're gonna strive for that. And
so
let's
cool.
Go. And it became a very interesting journey actually because to this day that initial prompt works after thousands of exchanges. So it's still like you still have like it's still that particular chat still knows its role and speaks in that language of Hunter S. Thompson.
That chat.
But I don't use it so much these days because I have human partners at FutureWorks now. But yeah, it became a successful project. I mean, it ended up being the highest grossing Hustle GPT project.
Yours was?
Yeah.
Really?
Apparently, yeah.
That's super sick, man.
Yeah, the gentleman that founded the community,
Nice.
So.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I
And,
loved how you were sharing the like revenue dashboards as you're getting leads coming in and built out like the sort of quote tool to make it easy. And yeah, it's a really cool journey, man. I love to watch that.
That was a windy journey as well because like a lot of the leads came, but then like we got like a huge account. Like, okay, let's go.
Let's do this.
That company started having a lot of financial trouble. And so
As
it was
do.
a windy journey. Yeah?
Oh man.
But it worked. Yeah, it worked out. And then after that, I was just gonna, what the premise of this was like, we want to deliver things 3 times faster than an agency. We know the agency world very well. I mean, we've delivered for a whole bunch of companies like, Boom, Supersonic, Tesla, I don't know, a whole bunch of AI companies as well. And I thought that, it's a good goal to deliver things 3 times faster, just try. And therefore we can maybe do that 3 times cheaper, which would be such an interesting offering for climate organizations because we've got all those portfolio companies.
Totally.
And we've got peers and people who are driving for impacting climate. And I was like, how about we can offer them much cheaper services than we could otherwise? And then eventually that led to the climate cohort, which was 1/10 of the price. Right?
Amazing.
It was 90% down. And it just went for it and discovered. And sometimes it's like 5%, but sometimes it's 90%. And we kind of started learning where it's at. We carved out some team, and we started training the team, working together to deliver using AI. And the experiment ended. And then I was going to fold it all into Hukuiku and just keep the brand or not, but just kind of like basically re-envision the rest of the company.
Okay.
Because initially it was just sort of solving innovator's dilemma in a way, like where like Hukuiku has its clients and they're like primarily bigger projects. And I didn't want to like mess with what that is already. Or advisory board where like, just people love the name and stuff, keep it.
Yeah.
But I wanted to try something else on the side. And so there was just an experiment. And then maybe that would feed into the general structure and let us re-envision the structure using a lot of AI and just optimize the entire company. Right?
Yeah.
And that started happening anyway.
Right.
But then we've had some interesting conversations and I got invited to speak in a few places and we had a conversation with someone who's our advisor for the past 3 years and became a friend, former head of brand design at Google.
Oh, this is James.
James Hurst. And so we decided to join forces.
Amazing,
so suddenly this little experiment became like, okay, like
a thing.
We've got like a former head of brand design at Google joining an amazing brand strategist who's been previously, creative director of Pinterest.
Yeah.
And then, and before that led design studio that designed like brands for like Twitter and Airbnb and Champions League. And,
dude's been through it.
And so we were like, okay, we've got something very interesting here. How about we do FutureWorks 2.0? Which would then be oriented at not providing the same services that Hukuiku used to. Answering the question that everyone started asking, like, okay, well, can you do it for my company?
How do you do it to my
organization? Can you help us optimize things, reorganize things, and re-envision stuff? And so we decided to create this program based on my experience. And so it's like a 30-day program. It's like a challenge for a leadership team at the company to work together with them to help them apply those tools.
Super high leverage, amazingly high leverage.
And that's now evolving. So now we've got like capacity to build private LLMs as well.
Really? No way.
It's
wow, dude. That's
now it's just in our deck, but it's going to be announced within this month. And we're going to be we're capable of doing like fully private LLMs, hardware or cloud hosted, and a whole bunch of other kind of services that power up companies using AI. And so that became like a thing.
Such a journey, bro. Such a journey over
we
5-6 months.
Some experiments as well. So we created the fundraising tool for climate organizations and
I love
climate investors and that's the.
So you had this on one thread, but then at the same time, this is when Estrela in Brazil also popped up, right? Like these are kind of concurrent projects that were coming through. Do you want to give an outline on what this is, the size of the land, like what the vision for this project is?
Sure. So part of our committee owns this piece of land in Brazil. It's 24 square kilometers, which is 6,000 acres for the American listeners here. Uh, it's a huge piece of land. I think it's more than a third of the area of the entire urban area of Lisbon.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's got like I think 8 kilometers of beach, and the river, and 16 square kilometers of mangroves.
Dude.
Some of them need some love and regeneration, and humongous old farm of coconut trees. I think 50,000 of them are still surviving. A whole bunch, like thousands of them died, and they're just like stumps. And an old kind of salt mine, like Salinas. And there's nothing there. Right? Like there's like one building, and now there's like a little bit of infrastructure being built. And
sure.
So we've embarked on this journey to create the regenerative innovation hub there.
Yeah, regenerative innovation hub. I love this, man.
Yeah, and I kind of like, you mentioned it briefly, like, we've been, the mission of Future Horizon, everything we do has been kind of like connecting, right? Like bridging. Like we would have like indigenous leaders, and then we'd have billionaires, and we have, tech people, and we have philosophers and artists, and
such a nice combination
within the events, just to kind of like discuss things from different angles, and so we kind of want to create the same space on the Future Horizon framework, but with like new kind of understanding, and I can speak to what's the future of Future Horizon, but we'll be organizing a gathering there, which is like, you can think of it as like a small regional regenerative burn. Burning Man.
But with the possibility for permanence, right? Where you can actually end up building structures over a long term and investing in this land for decades.
Yeah, I mean, the infrastructure is going to be built, but not so much. I mean, there will be some, like an eco resort, which is like few % of the land. And then the rest is sort of up for grabs. But the interesting thing is, there is, right next door, across, there is a road that leads to like a little town, and that's nearby, beautiful town. There is the biggest preservation of original Mata Atlantica, so like the Atlantic rainforest, in existence. 26 square kilometers, so marginally bigger than this one.
That's incredible.
If you come to Estrella, like, it's a beautiful place full of nature. There are monkeys and capybaras and dolphins and whales and all sorts of sea turtles, like hundreds of sea turtles laying eggs. But so it seems like nature until you go to the actual original rainforest next door, and then you're like, okay, this is
all of her fullness.
So the mission is to bring people like yourself,
I'm there, bro. I'm there.
Creative thinkers, the leaders, the people who have ideas and vision, to discuss how could we recreate, and how could we recreate it in a way that is economically viable, creates, not just carbon tokens, but like biodiversity tokens. It creates maybe some interesting bioeconomy around it. Agroforestry, or what would that be, and various ways. And we hope to bring those experiments there and see if those projects could then be transplanted somewhere else. If there's like economical viability, like of planting, square kilometer of trees, and then in a non-extractive way. Getting economical benefits that outweigh clearing out the woods, and that could be transplanted to, the Amazon and so on. And the project is so big that it has the ear of the governor, and the governor is very close with the president.
Nice,
because she's
amazing institutional connections.
His side through his very hard times. And so there is just a lot of potential for this project to become, kind of influential.
Yeah, and to have a sandbox for regenerative experimentation for these communities all over the world, building technology to actually have a place to implement it on the ground. And to bring them all together and to showcase what's working and what isn't, and to have this really deep root to the most vibrant, biodiverse place on Earth is truly exceptional. So I'm very honored, man, to have the chance to come down and see you guys. It's going to be really fun. And I love these long-term threads of of hope that we're beginning to lay through this path of finding our way through all these different ventures, all these different communities sprouting up all over the world, and figuring out like, how does this stuff actually work? A lot of regenerative economics exists in theory, but we don't have that many case studies that we can effectively point to.
Yeah.
And yet there seems to be a really deep appetite to put this into action, to practice it in the flesh and see what actually works. And so I'm curious, obviously you've kind of wrapped the stream of initiatives under a larger brand, Liminal Future Group, which LFG is the best abbreviation you could ask for, if you ask me. But I'm curious to look at, beyond Estrela, beyond what we're seeing in Portugal. It seems like there is this kind of propagation of all these different experiments and community concepts all over the world with a new vision of the future. And yet at the same time, these different people are starting to experiment with different realms and experiences of consciousness and really pushing beyond the culture that exists in the technology space today.
Yeah.
I'd love to get your read on this movement. Like, what are you seeing globally? Obviously, ReFi DAO and FutureQuest, but there's so many more that you've seen. What's on the canvas for you?
Firstly, you guys are doing such inspiring work with ReFi DAO and the way it's spreading and influencing the world and the network you're building. It's really inspiring.
It's an honor, man.
But there are many others, right? And we're definitely seeing a lot of communities pop up and a lot of interesting conversations happen. But there are sort of different visions of the future, different approaches, but they all kind of head in the same way or out of the same care for essentially what we are now learning to name, heading towards symbiosis. But I think that's why, Liminal Future Group, so LFG is a joke, it just happened. But
it's
the
a great
liminality of the future is something that is, driving our thinking, basically. If we are at the doorstep of singularity, going back to what we talked about earlier, then we do not know what the future might bring. And that is driven by those two super cycles. It's not necessarily just the tech and AI. It's we really don't know. For many researchers this summer, and what's happening to temperatures this summer already is showing that the models are off.
Charts.
So let's see, right? And the higher they raise, the higher the chance that they raise more in the future, and so it's already kind of becoming unpredictable, right? And so there is this liminality, there's this space where we could be headed for total dystopian disaster, or we could be headed for relative utopia, depending how things turned out and how do humans act around it. And for better or worse, the mom we call for to help AI
please, mommy, sort this shit out.
Is
getting hot in here.
We see it as a way to help us accelerate in the right direction and solve a lot of those problems. And the other side of it that we see is those communities, and we've been having very interesting conversations as well with, for example, Chad Frischman, who will be, doing podcasts with you and a dear friend. And for those who don't know, Chad previously leading research for Project Drawdown, and an incredibly inspiring person in climate. And in that conversation, you could say that it's inevitable, or in those conversations, it's inevitable that we're headed towards pretty tough times for humanity, right? At this point, this summer is a great signifier. I mean, there are so many people saying already you cannot go to Greece anymore in the summer or something like that, right? And that's not even the beginning, in a way.
And 2023, we've got a long way to go.
And those are the privileged people who have AC and so on. And so it's things will get rough. And then what emerges from that is the question, right? And so there are many inspiring figures thinking in Daniel Schmachtenberger and so on, how can we escape meta crisis, and what can emerge and so on. But I think community will be very important, and so seeing those communities emerge, we want to do as much as we can to support them,
of course, and bring them together.
Exactly. And so the future of Future Horizon, for example,
let's go there,
is now becoming more about bringing community leaders together as well, and just together kind of working where to drive things and how to empower those people. And then in our dives, we've to some degree concluded that there are those huge events happening,
Yeah.
like climate change, global warming. It's sort of like there isn't a person that can do anything about it. Collectively we can, but it requires a lot of work in order to actually drive everyone in the direction, and then that requires time, and the time might see a mismatch with the deadline.
Sure.
And so I'm positive about the eventual outcome, but I do think that times will be hard at one point. And in the essence of it, really, what lies there is simply kind of being kind to people and empowering them to be stronger, helping them heal, helping them endure, right?
Yeah.
And so I think core part of what those communities do in the end will be driving this message, opening people's hearts a bit, connecting them to each other deeper, and empowering those leaders who are willing to either lead communities, which is like really difficult to make money on, even to like live your life, and it's something that is a lot of work, but it's essential.
Yeah.
And the leaders who are driving, climate companies, non-profits, and so on. And so that's kind of future horizon is as much as the first 3 years were like, let's all connect and let's figure out where are we headed.
Totally.
Now more so it's like, let's work and empower each other, other leaders, people who drive communities, and collaborate with everyone. And with you guys and others. And we hope to just
Can't wait, man.
Start, contributing as much as we can.
And I think there's this interesting trend that goes back to what you're talking about with kind of the wave of evolution with AI. Mobile come to the scene through Apple's iPhone, was probably the single largest societal disruptor that we've seen.
Yeah.
Maybe even bigger than the internet in the way that it made the power of the internet accessible. And it feels like AI is a similar wave of evolution that we're seeing. But what I think a lot of people outside of this space are missing is the necessity of regeneration as a pathway for survival.
Yeah.
And if we look at, evolutionary history, like life endures. Even after the dinosaurs went extinct, these, extinctions happen. But from this destructive process, we got butterflies and birds and dolphins and humans. And actually, when we take a larger lens, regeneration is inevitable on the largest time frame possible. Life will endure on Earth. And these cycles will transpire and change will, occur. And the question is, what is our role in this transition? And I feel these communities that you're describing are really kind of beacons of light where people are seeing into the future, seeing into the ability to create economic and societal systems that are just for not only people, but also the planet. And I love this kind of notion of bringing nature onto the balance sheet, of bringing nature into the legal system, the rights of personhood for a river. I feel like these are really deep, palatable notions that are somewhat off because we're kind of, bootstrapping them onto an old, broken framework. But they're representing a segue to this new infrastructure that we can actually use to live in harmony with the earth. And the one thing I really enjoyed that you mentioned was this kind of idea of communities of care, of, being there to be with people. Because I think we've seen, the advent of addictive, mobile, dopamine life is we actually become very separate and very isolated. And mental health is at an all-time low. Suicide is rampant, considered an epidemic in many countries, not only just the US. And actually, there's a better way of doing things, of living in relationship with your local sense of place and communities while also being connected to a global movement. And so I think this idea of bringing these networks together, each of us leaning in beyond the boundaries of our brands and saying, hey, ReFi DAO is as much a part of Future Horizon, is as much a part of Green Pill, is as much a part of, whatever network. As long as we share this vision for a regenerative future, we're building towards the same goal. And it's important to embrace and accept the pluralist expression of what regeneration looks like in each of these communities. But the fact that we're coming together means that there is a new system that's emerging on the other side.
It sounds very hippie, right? Like, I just had a bunch of discussions about it. It's it sounds very hippie that we should just love each other, care for each other. But ultimately, that is really what builds those communities and drives and kind of
and it's what humans need to survive.
Powers people up. And
children without love die.
And eventually, it will be what helps people survive and thrive and live through difficult times. And so it's really, I feel like there is a lot of focus on peak performance,
Yeah.
on biohacking,
Mm,
on
mm,
becoming a better unit. There
mm.
isn't so much focus right now. I don't see it as much on like a new kind of community, sort of like done more selflessly than church would.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We need new models. We need a new third place. New
and
place to
so
belong.
I think that maybe that's emerging, because what we're seeing is there is a lot of those communities pop up. Like we hear about those all the time, and it's quite amazing to see them.
Yeah.
And they all seem to be quite collaborative. And yeah, we'll see where it goes. But I do think that it's a very important part of the equation. Just basically kind of like caring for each other. And I've been a person that for a long time has been like, humans are gonna be fine as a species. What we really need to worry about is like extinction, because we're not bringing those other species back. I mean, it's very unlikely. Like, I had a chance to spend some time with the last two great white northern rhinos.
We're gonna do an episode on this actually,
Yeah.
on that exact story.
Yeah, we got a chance to like cowboy them on horses and stuff. It was a bizarre experience. I got to like spend time and look them in the eye, and it's a species that is functionally extinct, right?
Wow.
And there is this multinational effort to bring them back, which is I think $60 million plus already. And to bring the species back, and they're doing that through surrogate species, and it's all organized. They're extracting embryos. They've got sperm from the last male, which already died. Whole operation, right? Many years, millions of dollars to bring one species back. And so like, some people are saying, well, don't worry, like we can bring the species back. I think it will be very difficult, especially that like the estimate is that there are 8 million species in the world, and we have actually classified like 2.2 million, I think, to my knowledge. And so, just a part, and there is an expectation that around a third of all species will go away within the next sort of 50 years. And so, some call it an aesthetics issue for humans, which from like a kind of Stoic Buddhist place actually sort of makes sense in a way, like it's not really fundamental to what we care about if it's consciousness. The species, they go away, but it doesn't really affect our life. But it is, they are incredible, and they're there, and and for anyone being in nature, connecting counters what you just talked about. You actually get more peaceful, get happier, and so on. People use it all the time, right? And so losing all of that environment is a huge issue. So I've been always like, humans are gonna be fine. I care for the environment, but increasingly recently, I feel like actually that aspect is the key element. Caring for humans more and caring for their journey on an increasing scale. Also, that contributes to the rest. But it's definitely something that's is becoming much more important.
Absolutely.
For us.
Yeah, and it's been a key part of my journey as well as a leader. I think you and I both know the burden of carrying, other people on your balance sheet, other people on your cap table, other people on your salary, and there's this phenomena of whatever gets stuck in us, emanates into our companies, into the cultures that we create and the communities that we interact with. And there seems to be this really deep calling and invitation to do that work within our own hearts. Yeah. And the more I've done that work, the more intimately connected I feel towards those disparate living beings as a core part of my being. And I can't quite rationalize or explain it other than just a felt sense, a cellular knowing that they belong here. And they matter, and we're better off with them in this beautiful earth of life. Yeah. And I'm so glad to leave it on a hopeful note. I think looking at, rising temperatures beyond projected mean this summer, and 70+% of biodiversity being destroyed in the last 40 years, it's very easy to lose hope. But it seems like you have a really firm and clear conviction about what you're doing and what you have been called here to do. Yeah. And yeah, man, it's an honor to witness you play your instruments so beautifully. And I feel like there's an exciting path ahead. And I'm curious for people listening who really resonate with you and your journey and want to get involved in what you're building. What's one thing that people can do?
To get involved, well, I think where you can get probably the most immediate value out of what we do right now is basically subscribe to our newsletter, which we started last Friday.
Nice,
like
man.
4 days ago.
What's the URL?
Just go to futureworks.ai,
Oh,
and there is a little input for your email. It's a free newsletter, but it gives kind of AI tools and processes and so on that you can use to kind of operationalize your organization better, function better, whether you're a solopreneur or like a bigger organization. And that will keep doing. And there will be a bunch of like more personal elements in this newsletter coming as well. And that comes from my email. So you can just email me.
nice.
And we can chat about this and more and anything that we mentioned here. We keep building the other things. Another aspect, I guess, is we will be inviting very few people to come with us to the land in Brazil
Yeah, I was just thinking about this.
in October, end of October, last week of October. We'll be inviting very few people to come with us and dream what could be. So we are looking for founders, leaders, thinkers, people who could come and look like, okay, we've got this piece of land. How about we do this sort of bioeconomic structure, this sort of development when it comes to planting nature to create like a fully functioning innovation hub
So cool.
with time. And we'll also be hosting those gatherings there. So there will be infrastructure, like a little kind of Burning Man-ish festival. And so hit me up as well, same way. Just you can just do it the same way, and hit me up if you'd like to come. And then we can hang in person in a beautiful piece of
Yes,
land
bro.
in Brazil and chat about all this.
It'd be great to have a Bill Mollison permaculture crew living there on site for a year to observe the land and the changing of the seasons and really understand and listen to the soil. I think, my ex-wife had a background in permaculture, and there is this sense of being in that place over a long period of time. So who knows? Don't know if that eco resort's coming through in the near time, but it'd be amazing to see, some deep roots being set in Estrela. Well, thank you so much, Matt. I'm going to let you go in just a sec, but I just wanted to ask if there's anything I didn't ask you about that you wanted to jump into today before we leave.
I think we've covered a lot of ground.
Go. Amazing.
I think that's. I feel complete.
Awesome, man. Thanks for coming on. And let's check in a few months. I'm super curious to see where FutureWorks goes, and I can't wait to bring our communities together and see what we can build.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Cheers.